guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is an entitled people story. Let me tell you a story about my dear old dad. He was a hard-working man who started his career as a plumber. His skills were highly sought after, and he quickly built a reputation as one of the best in the business. However, his life took a turn when he decided to serve his country and joined the military. During his time in the service, my dad sustained various injuries and was exposed to harmful chemicals. When he returned home, he had to fight for his disability and financial compensation. It was a tough battle, but he didn't give up. He needed to provide for his family, and to make ends meet, he took on side jobs. One of his clients was a neighbor up the road who needed some serious work done in his home. The job was big, and my dad knew it was going to be a challenge, but he agreed to do it anyway. The neighbor promised to pay my dad over $3,000 for the labor, but as you might have guessed, he didn't keep his word. To make matters worse, the neighbor had the audacity to laugh at my dad and taunt him, saying that he didn't have to pay since the work was done under the table. My dad was livid. He knew he couldn't let this slide. So, he started planning his revenge. For the next couple of weeks, my dad spent his free time sharpening jacks, the kind that come in the game of jacks, into little spikes. He bought a ton of them and started throwing them into the neighbor's driveway every time he drove by. It wasn't long before the neighbor started experiencing flat tires on a regular basis, and he had to keep repairing and replacing them. On Christmas Day, my dad couldn't contain his excitement. He called me up, cackling hysterically, and told me that he had driven by the neighbor's house and saw that the whole family was dressed up and ready to go to church. Their car was parked in the yard, and it had a couple of flats. The neighbor had been parking on the grass, thinking he was outsmarting my dad, but he had no idea that my dad had been throwing the jacks in the yard too. I loved my dad's mischievous side, and this was one of my favorite memories of him. He showed that even when life is tough and unfair, you can still have a little fun and get your revenge in your own way. Years later, my dad's health continued to decline, and he had to retire early. But he never lost his spirit. He spent his days fishing, telling stories, and laughing with his family and friends. Sadly, he passed away a few years ago, but his memory lives on through all the wonderful things he did and the people he touched. And as for the neighbor who never paid him, well, let's just say that karma has a way of catching up with people. Word got around about what he did, and he lost his reputation and many of his clients. He eventually had to sell his house and move away. It just goes to show that you should never underestimate the power of doing the right thing and treating people with respect. The next story is titled Print Out the Internet? Yes ma'am. This is about a decade ago, but still well within the realm of the internet. I was a technical writer for the government and had slowly been transferring our old employee handbook, think government bureaucracy from the 1940s, into a modern and actually useful doc. Think one page with our policies and links to useful websites, like Office of Personnel Management, forms for workman's comp, etc. My boss wanted the whole thing printed out, on her desk the next morning. This was Monday of the Thanksgiving weekend. I printed out the 200 or so pages and just had the links to the various websites in bold. This took about an hour, and I left it on her desk before going home that night. She calls me in her office on Tuesday afternoon and proceeds to yell at me at how stupid I am. Do I think people can just go to a website when it is on paper? No. I need to print everything out. I calmly tell her that these sites are pretty dense and deep, and it would be about 10,000 pages. She says she does not care. It needs to be on her desk, damn it, first thing Monday morning. Mind you, this is now Tuesday and we usually had some of Wednesday off. I was not really planning to work Thursday, Thanksgiving or Friday, as I had applied for leave and was looking forward to a nice relaxing long weekend. I don't have family, but I had plans. But okay. I asked for, and got the request to have, everything pertaining to the employee handbook online in a printed format. I also had real work and real deadlines. A quick bit of context. She was my boss. She did my performance appraisals, and she could make my life miserable and possibly fire me. However, my clients were teams that put together engineering plans, biological assessments, scientific journal articles, reports to Congress, etc. That had real-world deadlines. On some of these, if you missed the publication date, your agency paid $100,000 a day in delay fees. Or you would piss off a congressperson, which is never a good idea. And I was really getting sick and tired of my boss's requests that took me away from my actual work. So, I was printing and printing all the rest of Tuesday afternoon, and then Wednesday. I had to go to the site, print, click on the next link, print, etc. On Wednesday, we got a letter from a Congress critter that was actually important. Had we not gotten that, I might not have done what I did. I got overtime approved pronto to take care of this request. So, I did work Thanksgiving. As I was doing that, I kept on printing. And printing. I used up every sheet of paper in our 14-story building. I kept on researching the response for the congressional, printing, going to the next floor to carefully get that packet of paper to tuck under the appropriate page, etc. I had paper in about 20 different conference rooms. I could have done the congressional in about 8 hours. But it was not due until Monday. And all of this printing took me a good 24 hours of work. So, I put in for 32 hours, Thursday, Fri, Sat, and Sun. Got it done. This is now 2 stacks of paper, each about 6 feet high. I was way under in my estimate of 10,000 pages as it was more like about 30,000. Remember, I had at least 5 printers going at once for 4 days etc. I put this in my boss's office, which was already none too clean and pristine. I got written up, with a disciplinary hearing and everything. The charge was malicious compliance. I kept my job only because I did have her request in an email. The next story is entitled Mother Thinks Her Kid Can Do Whatever He Wants with No Consequences. Names have been changed for privacy. First, I apologize for formatting, as I'm on mobile. I also apologize if the story isn't told well as it's not something I'm great at. About 3 years ago, my dad got married to ESM and they moved in with us, along with her kids, Billy, 5M, and her 3 daughters, Sam, 13F, Sydney, 17F, and Kelly, 19F. As a 16-year-old who was already living with 3 other siblings and my dad. Other siblings are not relevant to the story. This was not something any of us were happy about, but we didn't really have a choice. From the start, I realized that Billy was an entitled brat, and his mother did nothing but enable him. He would steal my stuff, including multiple times in which he stole my phone, and I missed the bus in the morning because my phone is my alarm. He also would throw a tantrum anytime he didn't get exactly what he wanted. I talked to my dad about this, and he said that I had full authority to discipline him when there are no parents in the house. I say parents specifically because while Kelly was technically in charge of babysitting when the parents were gone, her and Sydney would just sit in their room and either smoke weed or drink most days, completely ignoring everything else going on in the house, which I have plenty of stories about that as well, which left the rest of us to make sure nobody died, and the house didn't burn down. This specific incident, I watched Billy try to take my computer from my desk. When I tried to say something to him, he immediately burst into a fit about how it wasn't fair that I got a computer, and he didn't, and that he wanted a turn. I tried to explain to him that I needed the computer for schoolwork I was working on, but when I tried to tell him to give me the computer back, he just completely flipped out and ended up breaking my computer. I was livid at this point, but trying to keep my composure the best I can, admittedly not doing a great job of it, told him to go sit in his room until I got a hold of my dad to figure out what he wanted me to do. I couldn't get a hold of my dad, and when I called my stepmom, she immediately defended him and started berating me for even thinking about disciplining him. When they finally got home, she completely flipped out, telling me that I was grounded because I had no right to try and discipline her child and I was completely out of line, but still not a single consequence for the child that just broke my $500 computer that I now have to replace myself. I know damn well at this point I'm not getting any help with that. I tried to talk to my dad, but he just took her side to avoid conflict. My dad is very non-confrontational, so this wasn't a surprise. Things like this continued to happen, and any time I did what my dad told me to do, I was called a bully and punished, and Sam would even go as far as to take the 5-year-old impressionable child aside and tell him how horrible I am and to not listen to anything I say because I'm just a bully. Eventually my dad started to take my side, but that really didn't help much when all 5 of the other people involved, Sydney and Kelly, were not involved with this situation but were often defending Billy, and others would defend Billy until it killed them. This was just one story that was honestly kind of mild compared to some other stuff that's happened with that family, as they are all insane and narcissistic people. but I don't really remember as many specific details about other things that happened as much as I do this one, probably because it cost me $50,000. I'm proud to say that I left that house within 6 months of this situation, and I'm NC with my entire stepfamily and LC with my dad. Even though he isn't the problem, it's nearly impossible to contact him without my stepmom also being involved, so that's why I've gone LC with him. I'm now at university and doing well, and I'm extremely grateful that my bio mom is as helpful and supportive as she is. The next story is titled How Refusing a Check with Kittens Saved a Girl's Life. I was working a late shift, and it was rather quiet. I had only been working at the store for only 5 months or so. A man came through my line, and he was about 6 foot tall, covered in tattoos, and not the nicely made tattoos you see from a good tattoo shop. I mean the kind that looks like he had them done in the cellar of a seedy biker bar type. He was heavy built, and wore a leather biker vest. He did not seem the type to feel guilty about shanking you on the street. He bought a few items, but had beer. I of course ID him, and he shows it to me, and I total everything. He pulls out a checkbook, and writes a check. The check had a basket of kittens on it, and this seemed like one of those Facebook posts of bikers look mean, but have a heart of gold type things. Well, I look at the check, his name is nowhere on the check. It has a girl's name on it, and I tell him that I could not accept it because it is not his check, and does not have his name. He claims the girl is with him, and he would go get her real quick. He leaves, and left the check on the counter. As soon as he is out of sight, I call for a manager, and they take the check. And what I did not know was that about half an hour before an Amber Alert was released, and being the fact, this was about 11 years ago, very few people had SMS alerts for things like this, and only because our company is a certified safe place we receive faxes which had Amber Alerts, and such. The manager recognized the name, and contacted police. Minutes later we had a few cops show up, and they asked me what the guy looked like, and everything said. They even fingerprinted the stuff the guy was buying. Security gave them the footage of the guy, and were lucky to get the guy's plate number. A few minutes later all the cops left, and I mean in a hurry. Apparently the guy was spotted, and pulled over. They found the girl tied up in the back of the SUV he was driving, and luckily she was not hurt. She was kidnapped from where she worked after school, and her coworker called the cops when he got back from his break to find the place a mess, and her missing. The whole thing occurred within an hour and half time. She was taken to a local hospital where she was kept just in case overnight. The man was of course arrested. The next story is titled, No, Sir, I do not need you to call the cops on that guest. A few weeks back, when we were completely booked, a guest complained about the smell of weed coming from a room. I ask them which room they think it's coming out of, and they tell me. I go up to the room, knock on the door. It's a group of like 8 or 9 people, black and Latinx. I tell them someone reported the smell of it and asked if they had it. The room didn't smell strongly of it, but it's clear that they at least had been smoking before entering the hotel. They assured me they didn't, and I left it at that. I can't ask to search the room and they were keeping quiet, so I apologized and left. About 10 minutes later, the same guest called down to complain, except this time he said, I know you probably can't call the cops, but I can if you want. No, sir, I do not need you to call the cops on that guest. I will check on them again. I can do it, just let me know. Honestly, this time I just do a walk-by of the room. I still can't smell anything, and in my hotel you can smell smoke almost as soon as you step off the elevator. I go back down, am chilling, watching Daredevil Season 3, when a guest walks into the lobby. Do you need anything, sir? No, I'm just waiting on someone. I recognized his voice as the guest who'd been calling down. About 20 minutes go by, Daredevil is about to fight Bullseye for the first time, and one of my city's finest, whom I know because he has been here for other problems before, walks in and says he got a call. I didn't. That was me, this motherducker. I think there's someone smoking marijuana next to me, and this fellow isn't doing anything about it. The cops go up, speak to the guests I've already spoken to and come back down. I ask them if they found anything, of course they didn't. If they need me to sign something, they don't, and I apologize for the guest wasting their time. One of the things we have guests sign is a paper saying if they cause a disturbance to other guests, we reserve the right to ask them to leave. This includes loud noises, verbal or physical harassment, and basically anything we feel like violates the safety or well-being of another guest. So, I asked the officers to stick around for a minute. I called the guest who had called them, and informed him he has violated our disturbance policy and needs to leave. Of course, he fights it, starts yelling at me over the phone and refuses to leave. I ask the officers to accompany me up to the room, and together we walk this guy out of my hotel. Should have just listened to me in the first place. The next story is titled Bless the Woman Who Cancelled Her Reservation from Our Parking Lot. 30 minutes ago, I had someone with a reservation walk in without a mask, and when I told him he needed to put one on, he joked he had to get it out of his bag. He tried talking to me while he was unzipping his luggage, but I just waited for him to actually have a mask on. I don't really have patience for that kind of stuff anymore. So, I was so delighted, but of course also saddened, when I received a call 10 minutes ago from someone who was in our parking lot where she had learned someone she spent time with during the holidays had tested positive. At first I was worried she was wondering if she could still check in, but she just asked if there was any way she could cancel because she was about to make the drive all the way back home. I made sure I knew how much I appreciated that she respected me and the people in the hotel enough to call us and let us know, and I was glad to hear the person who did test positive was asymptomatic. I wished her well, and she drove away. That seems like the obvious thing to do for a lot of people, but as we know, working at a customer-facing position, you can't expect people to make rational decisions like that on a daily basis. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel and post some bear emojis in the comments.